Welcome to another one of our series of myofascial health self-care. This one is about freeing up the pelvis, and we're going to start from an assumption that the larger restrictions in the body that are around the pelvis and binding it down and stabilizing it, they have begun to soften and move. So I'm talking about how tight your hips are, how tight your lower back is. We're going to be looking more to help mobilize the smaller interior to the pelvis issues. We're going to be looking for those subtle joint movements that now hopefully are available to you. If it takes a little bit to get them going, don't worry about it. It does take some time. Keep focusing on feeling small movements. The movement of those joints is minute, but it is very critical. If you're going for big movements, you're probably missing what we're looking for. Instead, keep the movements small and subtle. There are sensations that you'll start to feel along your lower back, your SI joints, along your sacrum, possibly in your pubic bone. That's what we're looking for. If it takes a while to get them, don't lose hope. Keep at it. They will start to show up. Okay, so first, gonna be in a seated position, and it helps to have a ball. Actually, you should have one of your inflated balls. If you grab that one there, and you're going to sit it underneath your perineum area. That's the area between your sit bones and your pubic bone. So you should be sitting directly on the ball, not on your tailbone, but with the ball just in front of your tailbone. This tends to be tender and tight for people and is very needed. If it's too tender to sit on, do this for less time. Put a pillow underneath, put some extra cushioning or padding, take a little bit of air out of the ball, and make that more tolerable. But what you should be doing is softening through that tenderness. I'm going to start the timer. We want to be here for about 5 minutes. As you soften and settle, that will start to ease through your lower body, through your pelvic floor, I should say. Notice, where are your sit bones with this? Are they sinking around the ball? Are you clenching to hold up off of the ball? Can you soften and allow your pelvic floor to melt over the ball and the ball to sink into your pelvis? Notice what your spine is doing. Some people are curved backward in their lower back. Now, when I say this, I don't want you to tighten up your pelvic floor, but can you lengthen and straighten your spine? Can you reach the top of your head towards the ceiling, and in so doing, lengthen and straighten your spine? If that brings on more tenderness and pain in your pelvic floor with the ball, just back off and let that be easier. Have an aim, have an intention towards a taller and straighter spine with your pelvis settling around, over and around the ball. Remember to breathe, soften, melt. As you do this, start to notice any areas of extra holding and extra clenching. For example, you may be holding in your hips, or your shoulders, or your neck, or your jaw. Is there excess tension that you can soften and let go without collapsing? If you find yourself struggling to sit upright here, struggling to have that tall spine, you might want to sit up on a bolster. Put some kind of extra padding, extra support underneath your hips and allow your legs to be lower than your hips, your knees to be lower than your hips. You may find that you prefer to do this seated on a firm chair. You might also find something to hold on to in front of you, something stable, something sturdy, like a bar, a pole, a desk. With that bit of additional support, you might find that your lower body can soften more effectively, more easily. You might also start to notice that you've got a bit of a lean or a bit of a tilt going on here. One side of your pelvis might be higher than the other. Your torso, your upper body, might be pitched to one side or another. This is useful information. Start to notice which side seems higher, which side seems lower. We refer to this as an upslip. You may already be aware of which side you have, that where your hip is upslipped, which hip is upslipped. It's been about 5 minutes, so gently ease off of the ball, remove it from underneath. Take a moment and feel how your lower back is moving. It may very well be achy and sore. As these joints start to move, they usually ache. I like to think of it as stuck, rusted hinges that have not been moving. They've bound. They are now starting to creak as they are getting oiled and beginning to move, but they are not free and corrected yet. They ache when they move. That's an okay thing, that's a good thing. It's not a comfortable thing, but it's a good thing. Okay, so you're going to want the ball again. And that sense that you have of which hip, which side of your pelvis is higher, we want to place the ball under the opposite side. We want to place the ball under the sit bone of the lower hip, the lower side. In this case today, Chris's left hip is higher. It's been changing. It used to be his right hip. They do that. They go back and forth as things correct and balance out. Currently, his left hip is higher, so he's placing the ball underneath his right sit bone. Now, here's where sitting tall will help again. We're looking to have the ball prop up the lower side of the pelvis, and we want the two halves of the pelvis to slide against one another, to shear against one another through your sacrum. One side of the joint, the SI joint on either side of your sacrum, one or both of those will start to ache and hurt as it slides. It will feel kind of good. That may sound like an oxymoron, that may sound counterintuitive, but getting these structural corrections to happen feels kind of good. It feels kind of right and needed, even if it aches. Whichever side of your pelvis is the lower side, place the ball underneath it and sit. Now, the first tendency we have is to use our muscular bracing to hold tight around that, to protect those troubled joints from having to move. That's what you're doing all day long. That's why you're so exhausted. That's why you get so stiff. Your muscles are protecting against this troubled movement. What we want to do now is gently breathe and soften and allow those joints to slide. Soften your bracing, soften your protection. Allow the half of your pelvis that is lower to be lifted as the other half of your pelvis that is higher drops. And I'm not talking a tilt. You may be thinking that there is a tipping of your pelvis, a tilting of one side to the other, so that the whole pelvis as a bowl tips from one edge to the other. That's the bigger stuff that I was talking about earlier. I'm talking now about finding the smaller interior stuff where the bones themselves glide against each other. It's a much more small, subtle motion, and it usually aches quite a bit more as those joints start to move. We're talking about reshaping the bowl. Again, don't worry if you don't feel it yet. You may not need it in this particular way, or it may be too stiff and rigid to move yet. Soften and picture the two halves of your pelvis sliding against one another through that middle spot to one side or the other of the sacrum. It will start to happen at some point. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but it will start to happen. If you do find that something is achy and a bit painful, see if you can soften through it. That is a transition of joint alignment that is trying to happen but is having trouble. If you can soften through that, you might feel a little bit of a click or a shift, and you will feel a change in sensation. We are shifting, adjusting the fundamental structure of what's going on here in your pelvis. It will feel different when it shifts. That's been about 5 minutes. Gently ease off. Slowly test the movement of your lower back. These changes can be odd, and it can take your body a moment or two to get used to them. Gentle movement, gentle curiosity in how does my body work now. Tilt forward, tilt back through your pelvis. Lift up one side or the other. When everything feels reasonably okay, again, it might be sore. Start beginning to free up the pelvis will tend to feel sore and may flare things up. Don't let that discourage you. When everything feels okay to move, please come to lie face down on your stomach. You'll still need the ball. What we've just been addressing is the upslip. Many people also have a rotation through one side of their pelvis. One side of their pelvis, the hip bone, is rotated forward. If you have a sense of which side that is, or if you've been told which side that is, that's the hip that you want to do this with. It is okay to do it with the other hip. It's all actually good to do it with the other hip too, so don't worry about getting it wrong. And do both sides. And if you know which side is the rotated forward side, emphasize that side. Spend more time with that one. Today, Chris's right hip is the side that's rotated forward, so I'm going to ask him to turn around so we can see the right hip better than the left. Now, if you reach down and feel for where that bony protuberance is right in the front of your hip, it's right about there, where that front hip pocket is, there is a bit of an angle, a corner of your pelvis where it comes from the back side to the front side. We call that the ASIS, and that's what we want to use as a lever to rotate that hip, that side of the pelvis. If you can place that ball underneath that bony spot, right about there. And what that will do as Chris settles, as you settle through that onto the floor with the ball underneath, that will start to rotate his right hip backwards. The pivot point is down there where his hip joint is. The whole bony half of that pelvis is now being encouraged to rotate backwards, while his left side is dropping forwards. Once again, the tendency, the very strong tendency, you're going around all day like this, is to have your muscles bracing and solidifying and stabilizing everything. Again, hopefully, we've already begun to soften and release some of that. Hopefully you already have a sense of how to soften around that. Breathe and soften and melt, and allow your sacrum, your lower back, your opposite hip to drop, while the ball holds up the hip that we're focusing on. There should be a rotation, there should be a twisting through and around your sacrum. It's a small, subtle movement, a millimeter or two. You may be tempted to push against the ball. There can be some value in that. You may find that that's how you access things. If that's the case, go ahead and do that. I also suggest that you let go of that push at some point and simply soften and settle. Allow your opposite hip to drop. Allow your sacrum to rotate as the ball holds up this hip. If you happen to be sore around that bony spot where we're placing the ball, that is a very common thing because those tissues get very, very tight. Your body is trying to stabilize your twisted, imbalanced pelvis, and it grabs on and holds, and those tissues get very, very sore and tight. If this is intense, find a way to ease it up a little bit. Soften the ball, place a pillow underneath your hips, something. You might try a pillow underneath your belly or your chest, or you might come up on your elbows. We don't want it so intense that you cannot soften. But if that is tender, then you very much need this sort of thing. Do it as gently as you can in a way that still asks it to change. Soften around that. Allow the tissues to soften and let go. Often, much of the ache is because of how tightly you're holding on to protection. Those muscles get tired and sore. Imagine holding a fist gripped tightly around something that you don't want to let go, not only for 5 minutes, but for hours and days and years. Those muscles get tired and sore. And because they're sore, your body, your mind gets the message, I need to hold tighter for protection. It's counterintuitive, but softening into that pain, letting go and ceasing the protection against that pain is the way to allow it to change for the better. It will start to flare and increase in intensity at first when you let go. But as it changes, that intensity will start to fade. That pain will start to ease. Or it will transition. Remember that as these changes, as these releases move through your body, new areas will start to ache and hurt as they become the spot that is beginning to move. This is a good thing. It's been about 5 minutes, so please ease up off of the ball. Come up on your elbows perhaps, start to move and shift and test how things are moving through your low back. Anytime we get structural change through the low back, be gentle and curious and slow about testing it out. Small movements, then bigger movements. People will tend to just grab hold of everything tight around and just move. They'll heave themselves around like one big lump. That's where you get injured and hurt again and spasm. Please don't do that anymore. Test the movability. Test the feel of alignment. Test for where things feel weak and problematic. Gently move them. See if there's a catch or a twist or a shift in there that needs to happen so that it can feel better. Gentle, curious exploration of what is troubled is the way to help heal it. You've been going around bracing and clenching and immobilizing it for stability. We need to shift the approach. As that feels okay to move, please turn to face up on your back. We're going to place the ball, or if you have it, a sacral wedge, underneath your sacrum. Either will work, either is good. They're both slightly different. Sometimes I prefer the ball, sometimes I prefer the sacral wedge. Take your pick. First, leave your knees up. Feet on the floor, knees up. This helps your back settle into place. Many people are very, very tight through their thighs, through the fronts of their thighs, and as they put their knees down, it pulls their pelvis and their low back into a forward tilt. That's why many people, and it's uncomfortable, that's why many people need a pillow or something underneath their knees in order to comfortably lie on their back. As this releases and changes, you regain the ability to lie flat on the floor and be comfortable. So give yourself at least a few breaths here with your knees up. You may spend the entire time with your knees up. Don't rush it. If it helps and you need to have your knees up, you may find that it helps to prop them to the sides so that you don't have to hold your knees up. If you put something steady against either knee so that you can relax and let your knees drop out to the side, you may find that this works better. When it feels okay, when it's not pulling on you and pulling you out of position, put your knees down, your legs out. I'll leave that up to you. Chris is taking a moment and testing and checking. It's a good way to apply your growing body awareness. Many people are unaware of just how much their legs yank their pelvis and low back around. Hips are so tight, thighs are so tight, everything is trying to brace and stabilize into the pelvis that every movement your leg makes torques and twists through your low back. And you're not aware of it. You just know that your back hurts and you think that's the problem. Notice how your body gets pulled and moved by how the rest of your body moves. As you're here, we're going to continue the same idea of softening and melting over that support, over the sacral wedge or the ball. That support is lifting your sacrum as you breathe and soften and allow your pelvis to drop around it. Notice for any areas of excessive tension. You should be able to be fairly relaxed here. If you need to, use a pillow. Prop yourself so that you don't have to hold yourself. But don't prop yourself so much that you don't challenge the needed movement. If you don't ask your body to move, it won't. The troubled areas, they have not been moving for far too long. They need to be asked to move, but they need to be asked to move gently. Let go of any excess tension in your belly, in your chest, in your neck, in your legs, and in your pelvis. You may very well feel your spine starting to settle more flatly, more solidly onto the floor. You might start to feel your neck lengthening as your lower back and your pelvis soften. These things are all tied together, and what hurts is not usually the thing that's causing the trouble. And that's been about 5 minutes. Please don't move from here yet. This next bit comes from this position. Although, if you prefer to do this without the ball or the sacral wedge, please do remove it. You can do this either way. I like to have the support because it keeps me focused on the sacrum and the movement that needs to happen immediately around the sacrum. Once again, if you move too big here, you are moving the big external stuff and not the interior small stuff. If you move the big external stuff, you are changing the position of the pelvic bowl. You are tipping it and tilting it this way and that. If you are moving the small interior stuff, you are changing the shape of the bowl. Both are needed. This time we're focusing on the shape of the bowl itself. Smaller movements, millimeters. What I'm going to have Chris do here, you may not be able to see the effect, so I'm going to ask him to show what he's doing with his hands. First, we'll do that first, and then you may be able to see the movement inside. It's that small. All right, so first we're going to address the upslip. Remember, Chris's side, his left hip is the upslip side. You pick yours. For this, I'm going to have Chris reach his left leg longer. His right leg pulled up into his body. Once again, not big, but focused on the sacrum. Focused on the left half of his pelvis going down, while the right half of his pelvis goes up, not in a tipping way, but in a sliding against the halves way. Could you show that with your hands, Chris, please? Left side is going which way? That way. Right side is going that way. Okay. Now ease up on that. This can be held for 5 minutes if you feel that you need it, but this is more of a mobilization exercise. So I'm going to have Chris do that again. Reach longer with the left, pull shorter with the right, through the middle of the pelvis. Do that for maybe a slow count of 4. And then let go. And do that again for another slow count of 4. And let go. And one more time. And let go. Since this is a mobilization rather than a release, we're going to do the same thing on the other side. We want to get each side moving. So reach longer with your other side and pull your high side up into your body. You may find that that's where you need to access the trouble first. Again, a slow count of 4 and let go. And do it again. And another count of 4, let go. And another slow count of 4. And let go. We're going to do this side fewer times because we want to emphasize moving the upslipped side down. We started with the upslipped side. We went on to the downslipped, relatively downslipped side. We're going to end on the upslipped side. So for Chris, left side, right side, left side. Let's do 4 more times on the left side, on the upslipped side. Reach longer. 1, 2, 3, 4, and let go. Reach longer. 1, 2, 3, 4, and let go. Longer. 1, 2, 3, 4, and let go. One more time. Reach longer. 1, 2, 3, 4, and let go. Like always, gently test out the movement here. What's your sense of what's happening there in the structure of your pelvis and your sacrum and your low back? We're still going to be in this position, so don't go too far, but just test. Now, in order to help and mobilize the rotation, remember Chris's right side is rotated forward. If you know which side your hips are rotated forward, which side of your hip pelvis is rotated forward, apply this to that side. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to emphasize the forward rotated side. We're going to do this 3 times, one on each, rotated forward side, the opposite side, and then back to the first side. 4 times each. What we're going to do is your non-forward rotated side, bend the knee and plant the foot. Now, your forward rotated side, place that foot on top of your knee. And I don't mean ankle, I mean bottom of your foot on top of that knee, just like Chris is doing. We're going to use your own thigh musculature to encourage your pelvis, the halves of your pelvis, to rotate. Since you've provided a base here, when you push and you pull, as I'm going to describe here in a moment, your feet aren't moving. They are asking then your hips to rotate because of the internal forces. I'm going to have Chris push together. His upper leg, push into his knee. His lower leg, pull into his foot. And you can do this in a very strong way. You can do it in a very subtle way. You will probably find that one or other of those seems to access the twist around your sacrum a little bit better. I usually find that the smaller, subtle pushes access what's going on better. The bigger pushes, they require me to brace what's going on. So you might find that the more gentle of a push you do with this, the better. But test it out and see. All right. So like I said, like before, a slow count of 4, push and lift with the foot that's down. You want to make sure that you are not pushing with your toes. It is okay to leave your foot remaining and relax. It is okay to leave your foot remaining on the surface, but please do not push with your toes. Lift with your thigh and your hip. Again, slow count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Soften. Again, 1, 2, 3, 4, and soften. Again, 1, 2, 3, 4, soften. And one more time. 1, 2, 3, 4, soften. Now switch your legs, please. Again, we want to mobilize things in both directions. This is the opposite side. We're only going to do this 3 times. Push and pull together. 1, 2, 3, 4, soften. Push and pull together again. 1, 2, 3, 4, and soften. One more time. 1, 2, 3, 4, soften. Switch your legs back again, the bottom of your foot on top of the opposite knee. We're going to do this side 4 times to emphasize correction of the rotation. Push and pull together. 1, 2, 3, 4, soften. Again, 1, 2, 3, 4, soften. Again, 1, 2, 3, 4, soften. And one more time. 1, 2, 3, 4. Soften. Go ahead and let your leg down. For this last bit, one more thing. This last bit, we're going to help correct the pubic symphysis. There is a disc in the front of your pubic bone that gets sheared by your pelvis being rotated and twisted. This final move helps place that disc back into a better adjusted position. You're going to need something to squeeze between your knees. A therapist can provide an arm, a forearm. It's helpful to have a ball. Chris has a ball right there. You could sit up and use the corner of your bed. You can place your legs, you can straddle the corner of your bed and have that between your knees. So if Chris, you'll take that ball, place it between your knees. You still want your knees bent, your feet planted. Lie back on the surface when that's stable. And you want to make sure that your feet are no wider apart than your hips. They do not need to be touching each other, but no wider apart than your hips. If they're wider than your hips, you are cheating and using different muscles. So when you're in this position, or straddled around a bed, or have somebody's arm there, squeeze your knees together. The wider this is, assuming you can get your knees around it, the better. Narrower is harder to have the effect. You want something solid. A pillow doesn't do a very good job. All right, so squeeze together for about a count of 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and relax. And you should be squeezing as hard as you can. This is a place where you lose a lot of strength due to misalignment and trying to brace and stabilize. This squeeze, you may feel there is a pain or a twinge or even a pop of adjustment on either side of your pubic bone. That's good. It can be painful, but squeeze. This correction is very needed. Some people squeeze with their heads and their necks and their faces and get headaches. Please don't do that. You don't need to squeeze the ball with your neck. Squeeze with your thighs. And again, squeeze for a second time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, as hard as you can, 8, 9, 10. Relax. Squeeze as hard as you can for as long as you can. Sustain it and get even stronger. Each squeeze should actually be stronger than the last. This last time, give it all you got and squeeze. With the caveat, don't injure yourself. If something is saying no, don't, then don't. Trust that. All right, third time, squeeze as hard as you can. 1, 2, 3, even harder, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Soften slowly. Okay. Come to a seated position as you can. Test out your movement. Don't move too fast. Come to a seated position as you can. And check out the movement of your spine, your low back, your pelvis. It may be sore. You may have found new awareness of issues. You may find that something has corrected and feels a whole lot better. Remember, getting stirred up and flared up is okay. It's not pleasant, but it is sometimes part of the process. Be gentle with yourself. Keep bringing awareness to the movement of your structure, of your low back, the vertebra, the spine, the pelvis, the sacrum, the hips. They all need to be aligned and moving properly. Notice those problems. Gently and curiously explore movement around them and of them. And continue to get treated.